The phone rang in the dead of night, jolting Elena awake. A shiver ran down her spine as she fumbled to answer, her fingers trembling. Calls at this hour never brought good news. Mrs. Carter? The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, clipped, professional. Your husband has been in an accident. He's in critical condition at St. James Hospital. You should come immediately. The world spun. Elena barely remembered throwing on a coat, barely noticed the cold night air as she raced to the hospital. Her mind clung to one thought: Nathan. Her husband. The man she loved. He had kissed her goodbye that morning with a promise to be home for dinner. Now he was fighting for his life. When she arrived, the hospital smelled of antiseptic and dread. A nurse led her to the ICU, speaking in hushed tones, but Elena couldn't process the words. Her gaze landed on the unconscious figure in the hospital bed. Nathan, pale and fragile, wires and tubes tethering him to the machines keeping him alive. Mrs. Carter, there's something we need to discuss. A doctor approached cautiously, holding a clipboard. Your husband is an organ donor. Specifically, he signed up as a direct donor for a woman named Sophia Hayes. The name hit her like a punch to the gut. Sophia Hayes. The woman from his past. The name she had heard only in whispers, in half-truths Nathan never fully explained. A name that now held the power to shatter her world. Elena's breath caught in her throat. I don't understand. What do you mean, direct donor? The doctor hesitated. He registered to donate to her specifically should anything happen to him. It's quite unusual. Elena's knees threatened to give way. Her husband, her Nathan, had made this choice long before the accident. Before he had even married her. A question clawed at her heart, suffocating in its weight. Had he married her out of love or guilt? Elena sat in the hospital waiting room, her mind a storm of confusion and betrayal. The beeping monitors, the hushed voices of nurses, it all faded into the background as one name consumed her thoughts. Sophia Hayes. Elena had never met her, but she knew of her. A former piece of Nathan's past that he never fully disclosed. She had asked once, early in their marriage, about the woman whose name lingered in old letters and forgotten photographs. Nathan had brushed it off, saying she was just someone he used to know. But people don't register as organ donors for just anyone. Taking a shaky breath, Elena pulled out her phone and searched for Sophia's name. Within seconds, an article appeared. Sophia Hayes, renowned pianist, battles a rare genetic disorder requiring a life-saving transplant. Her fingers clenched around the device. How long had Nathan known? How long had he been waiting for this moment? The door to the waiting room creaked open, and Elena looked up. A woman stepped inside. Tall, elegant, with soft features and a composed expression. Elena knew who she was before she even spoke. Sophia Hayes. The woman her husband might have loved more than her. Elena's breath hitched as Sophia approached. There was an undeniable grace about her, poised yet hesitant, as if she knew she was walking into a storm. Her eyes, a deep shade of brown, held a sadness that unsettled Elena. You must be Mrs. Carter, Sophia said, her voice gentle. Elena forced herself to stand. Yes. And you are? The question was unnecessary, but she wanted to hear it from her. Sophia hesitated before answering. Sophia Hayes. I'm so sorry about Nathan. I just heard about the accident. Elena's fingers curled into fists. Why are you here? The words burned on her tongue, but she held them back. Instead, she took a slow breath and asked, How do you know my husband? Sophia's lips parted, then pressed into a thin line. Finally, she said, Nathan never told you about me? Something inside Elena cracked. She let out a bitter laugh. He told me you were someone he used to know. But I suppose someone isn't worth signing over your organs for, is it? A flicker of pain crossed Sophia's face. She looked down for a moment, collecting herself, then met Elena's gaze. Nathan and we were engaged once. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Elena staggered back a step. Engaged? Her ears rang, her vision blurred. A sharp, Cold wave of realization crashed over her. "You're lying," she whispered. "Nathan would have told me." Sophia shook her head. "He wouldn't have. Not after how things ended." Elena didn't want to hear more. Didn't want to believe it. But before she could force herself to leave, Sophia took a deep breath and said the one thing that made Elena's world tilt off its axis. "He married you, Elena, but he once promised his life to me." Elena's heart pounded as she stood frozen in place. The words "he once promised his life to me" echoed in her head like a cruel joke. Nathan had been engaged to Sophia, and he had never told her. Swallowing the lump in her throat, Elena forced herself to meet Sophia's gaze. "If you were engaged, why didn't you marry him?" Sophia's expression flickered with something unreadable. "Because I left him." Elena let out a sharp breath. That wasn't what she expected. "You left him?" Sophia nodded, her voice softer now. "I had no choice. My health was deteriorating, and I didn't want Nathan to spend his life watching me waste away. He begged me to stay, but I knew he deserved better. So I disappeared. I thought if he hated me, he could move on." A bitter laugh slipped from Elena's lips. "And did he?" Sophia hesitated. "I thought he did. When I heard he married you, I believed he had finally let me go." She exhaled slowly. "But then I found out about the donor registration. I realized he never really did." Elena felt the ground beneath her shift. Her fingers trembled as she whispered, "Did he marry me out of love, or because he couldn't have you?" Sophia didn't answer, and that silence was more painful than words ever could be. Elena barely remembered leaving the waiting room. Her mind was a fog of betrayal and unanswered questions. She needed answers. Without thinking, she pulled out her phone and dialed a familiar number. After 2 rings, a tired voice answered. "Elena? It's late." "Mom." Elena cut in, her voice shaking. "Did you know?" A long pause. "Know what?" "That Nathan was engaged before me. That he loved someone else before he married me." Another silence. This time, deeper. Heavier. Then her mother-in-law spoke, her voice heavy with regret. "Elena, I think it's time you knew the truth." Elena gripped her phone tighter, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. "Tell me," she demanded. "Tell me everything." On the other end, Nathan's mother, Margaret Carter, sighed heavily. "I was hoping you'd never have to find out this way." Elena felt a sharp pang in her chest. So she had known. They all had. Everyone except her. "Nathan and Sophia were together for years," Margaret admitted. "They were inseparable. I truly believed they would get married. But then, she left." Elena swallowed hard. "Why didn't Nathan ever tell me?" Margaret hesitated. "Because he didn't want you to feel like you were a replacement." The word replacement felt like a slap to the face. "Was I?" Elena whispered. "Did he love me, or did he just settle for me because she was gone?" Margaret's voice softened. "Elena, he chose you. Whatever feelings he had for Sophia in the past, you were the one he married." "Then why did he sign up as her organ donor?" Silence. Then, Margaret spoke carefully. "Because he never stopped feeling responsible for her." Elena's breath hitched. Responsible? Sophia didn't just leave him, Elena. She left because she was sick. And Nathan believed, he still believes, that if he had tried harder, if he had fought for her, he could have saved her. The room spun. Nathan didn't just love Sophia. He felt guilt. He had carried it all these years, even into their marriage. And now, lying in that hospital bed, he was still choosing her. Elena's vision blurred as she whispered, "Did he ever really love me?" Margaret didn't answer, because some questions didn't have answers. Elena sat in the dimly lit hospital hallway, her hands clenched together so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Nathan lay unconscious just a few feet away, tubes and machines keeping him alive. The man she had built a life with, the man she thought she knew, had spent their marriage carrying another woman's name in his heart. Sophia Hayes. It wasn't just a past love, it was a love that never died. A deep ache settled in her chest, but she forced herself to think clearly. She needed more than just words and half-truths. She needed proof. Reaching into her bag, she pulled out Nathan's phone. The device was cracked from the accident, but when she pressed the power button, it flickered to life. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Did she really want to know?
Yes.
She had spent years living in a marriage that might have been built on a lie. She needed to know. With a steadying breath, she unlocked the phone using the password she had memorized long ago. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through his emails, his notes, searching for anything. And then she found it. A folder. Labeled, Sophia. Elena's pulse roared in her ears. Hands trembling, she tapped it open. Photos. Messages. Voicemails. Years of them. Her breath caught when she saw the most recent file. Just a few weeks ago. A draft of an unsent email. Her vision blurred as she read. Sophia, I know you'll never ask for it, but I've already made my decision. If something happens to me, you don't need to worry. I've taken care of it. You were always worth saving. Elena felt like she had been punched in the stomach. He had chosen Sophia. Not in words, not in actions, but in the one way that mattered most. Even when he had nothing left, he had still wanted to give Sophia everything. Elena's grip tightened around the phone. Nathan had to wake up, because the moment he did, he was going to answer for every lie he had ever told her. Elena sat beside Nathan's hospital bed, her hands trembling as she clutched his phone. The words from his unsent email echoed in her mind. You were always worth saving. Had she ever been? The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the room, each sound stretching her patience thinner and thinner. She had spent years by this man's side, believing in their love, their life, only to find out she had been living in someone else's shadow all along. Her fingers tightened around the phone as she whispered, Wake up, Nathan. I dare you to wake up. As if answering her challenge, his fingers twitched. Then a slow inhale, a flicker of his eyelids. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Nathan groaned softly, his eyes fluttering open, unfocused at first. He blinked, adjusting to the dim hospital light. His gaze roamed before finally landing on her. Elena? His voice was weak, scratchy from disuse. Her pulse pounded. This was it. This was the moment. She leaned forward, her face unreadable. You're awake. Nathan swallowed, trying to move, but winced in pain. His confusion was evident, but Elena didn't give him time to recover. She unlocked his phone with practiced ease and turned the screen toward him. The email draft glowed in the dim light. You were always worth saving. Nathan's face paled. His eyes darted from the screen to her face, and for the first time, she saw guilt flicker across his expression. She inhaled sharply. Tell me, Nathan, when you married me, did you do it out of love? Or was I just a way to make peace with your guilt? Nathan's throat worked as he tried to find the right words, but there were none. Silence stretched between them like an open wound. Finally, he closed his eyes and exhaled. Elena. His voice was hoarse. I never meant for you to find out this way. Her heart cracked at those words. Not I never meant to hurt you. Not you're wrong. Just, I never meant for you to find out. Her voice was eerily calm. Then tell me the truth, Nathan. Tell me why you were willing to die for her. He opened his eyes again, pain and regret swirling in them. And then, for the first time, Nathan told her everything. Elena's breath was shallow, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She had asked for the truth, but was she ready for it? Nathan's gaze lingered on the phone screen before he slowly turned his head toward her. His body was weak, but his voice, low and strained, held a weight that sent chills down her spine. Oh, Sophia, my life. Elena didn't flinch. She wouldn't. What do you mean? She asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Nathan exhaled, his fingers twitching slightly on the hospital bed. It was years ago, long before I met you.
He paused.
I was reckless back then, self-destructive. My father's business was failing, and I was drowning in the pressure to fix everything. I made dangerous choices. Elena's chest tightened. One night, I got myself into something I couldn't escape. He swallowed hard, as if forcing himself to keep going. I was set up. I didn't know it at the time, but I walked straight into a situation that nearly got me killed. He looked at her then, and she saw something raw in his eyes. Sophia saved me. Elena felt something crack inside her. How? She whispered. Nathan's jaw clenched. She took the blame for something she never did. He closed his eyes briefly. Because of me, she lost everything. Her family, her future. And then she got sick. Elena's pulse roared in her ears. So you felt responsible for her, she said, bitterness creeping into her voice. Nathan didn't deny it. I was responsible, he admitted. I tried to fix it. I tried to be there for her, but she wouldn't let me. She left before I could even do anything. His voice dropped. And then I met you. Elena's breath caught. Did you love me? The silence stretched so long that she almost thought he wouldn't answer. Then, his voice, barely a whisper. I wanted to. It wasn't enough. Tears stung at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You married me, Nathan. Her voice was sharp, edged with the pain clawing at her chest. You stood in front of me and promised to love me. But now I realize. I was just a second chance for you, wasn't I? A chance to save someone when you couldn't save her. Nathan shut his eyes. It wasn't like that. Then what was it? She snapped. Because when you thought you were dying, the first thing you did was make sure she'd live. His breath shuddered. Elena stood, her heart breaking in ways she didn't know were possible. I deserved more than this, she whispered. I deserved someone who would have chosen me first. Nathan's eyes opened again, panic flashing in them. Elena. But she was already turning away, because she finally had the answer she needed. And it was too late for him to fix it. Elena walked out of the hospital room, but the pain followed her like a shadow. Her hands trembled as she gripped the phone, Nathan's words still ringing in her ears. I wanted to love you. Not I did love you. Not I chose you. Just wanting to. A bitter laugh escaped her lips as she stepped into the elevator. The door slid shut, sealing her inside with nothing but the weight of a marriage that had never truly belonged to her. But there was one last thing she needed to do before she could really walk away. She needed to see her. The woman Nathan had loved first. The cafe was small, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. It was the kind of place where people whispered over coffee, and secrets lived in the spaces between words. Sophia Hayes sat by the window. Elena recognized her instantly. She was beautiful, but not in a loud, obvious way. There was something delicate about her. Something weary, as if life had taken too much from her, but she was still standing. Elena's footsteps felt too loud as she approached the table. Sophia looked up. Their eyes met. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, Sophia spoke first. You're Nathan's wife. The words felt like a knife. Not for much longer, Elena said evenly as she pulled out the chair opposite her. Sophia's expression didn't change. You found out. It wasn't a question. Elena let out a soft, humorless laugh. Did you ever wonder why he married me? Sophia didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a slow sip of her tea, as if weighing her words. I think you already know the answer to that. Elena's fingers curled around the edge of the table. He loved you. He never stopped loving you. Sophia sighed. Love is complicated. No, it's not, Elena shot back. It's supposed to be simple. It's supposed to be choosing one person, over and over again. Sophia finally looked at her, really looked at her. And you think I was the one he chose? Elena's breath hitched. Wasn't it always you? Sophia's lips parted, but for the first time, hesitation flickered in her eyes. Elena, she said softly, if Nathan had truly wanted to be with me, don't you think he would have been? The words slammed into Elena like a wave. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Because the truth, the real, awful truth, was that Nathan had married her. He had built a life with her. Maybe it wasn't the love she had dreamed of, maybe it had been messy and filled with shadows, but he had stayed. And Sophia hadn't. Elena's pulse pounded. Then why did he do it? She whispered. Why sign up as your organ donor? Why still put you first? Sophia's expression softened in a way that made Elena's stomach twist. Maybe he wasn't choosing me, she murmured. Maybe he was choosing to make peace with his past. Elena felt something in her chest crack open. Because for the first time, she realized Nathan's love hadn't been about Sophia. It had been about his own guilt. It had been about trying to undo a mistake that had already been written in stone. And maybe, just maybe, that meant he had loved Elena in his own broken way. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Elena stood slowly, her heart pounding in her ribs. She looked at Sophia one last time and said the words that finally set her free. It doesn't matter anymore. Then she turned and walked away. This time, she wasn't running from the past. She was walking toward her future. Elena didn't return to the hospital. There was nothing left to say. The moment she stepped out of that cafe, she felt something inside her shift. The weight she had carried, the love, the heartbreak, the betrayal, began to peel away, layer by layer. She had spent so much time searching for an answer, but now she understood. Nathan had been trapped in his past. And for a long time, she had been trapped in him. Not anymore. The divorce papers sat on her desk for 3 days. 3 days of silence. 3 days of waiting for something, anything from Nathan. But he didn't call. He didn't text. And for once, she didn't either. On the 4th day, she signed her name. The ink dried, sealing the end of a marriage that had never truly been whole. Nathan's name was still on her phone when she blocked it. His things were still in their apartment when she packed them. His scent still lingered in their bed when she slept somewhere else. Some wounds didn't heal overnight. But healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing yourself. And so she did. Months passed. The winter melted into spring. Elena moved to a new apartment, started a new job, and learned how to exist in a world where Nathan's shadow didn't follow her. One evening, as she sat by a cafe window with a book in her hands, she looked up and saw her reflection. For the first time in a long time, she didn't look lost. She didn't look like someone waiting for love to fix her. She looked free. And that was enough. That was everything. A year later, Elena stood by the ocean, the wind brushing against her skin. She had left behind the city that once held too many memories. The apartment where she spent sleepless nights, the hospital where she had learned the truth, the streets where she had walked as Nathan's wife. Now, she was just Elena. Not someone's wife. Not someone's second choice. Just herself. She had opened her own interior design firm, something she had once dreamed of but never dared to pursue. Now, she spent her days building homes for others, creating warmth where there had once been emptiness. And her heart? It was healing. Slowly. Surely. One evening, as she sat in a quiet seaside cafe, a man took the seat across from her. "Is this seat taken?" She looked up, meeting warm, kind eyes. She smiled. "Not anymore."